What happens when one of country music's top stars steps onto a live television stage and faces a panel of sharp-tongued hosts, all eager to challenge him? The result? A live broadcast filled with heat, tension, and sparks flying at every word. Blake Shelton made his entrance with that unmistakable swagger, flashing his trademark smile as the crowd erupted into applause. There was no denying the excitement that followed him into the studio. Whoopi Goldberg gave him a warm welcome, starting with casual talk about his latest album and upcoming tour. The mood seemed lighthearted, almost like a friendly chat. But that's when things took a turn. Joy Behar, never one to shy away from controversy, leaned forward, her tone turning serious. "Blake, I've got to ask you about some things you said recently," she began, her voice sharp. "You've made some comments about the music industry, about political correctness, and let's just say not everyone was thrilled with your thoughts." Blake's grin remained, but the easygoing tone was gone, replaced by a sharpness in his voice. "Well, Joy, I think a lot of people are sick and tired of being told what they can or can't say. Country music has always been about speaking the truth, even when it makes some folks uncomfortable." Joy's eyes narrowed, her voice taking on a more pointed edge. "But don't you think artists have a responsibility? Your words reach millions. Don't you think there's a duty to be careful with that?" Blake leaned in, his tone cool yet unwavering. "The people I sing for are smart enough to think for themselves. They don't need me or anyone else telling them how to live or what to believe." The air in the room grew thicker. Whoopi tried to redirect the conversation, asking about Blake's experience on The Voice, but Joy wasn't backing down. "You talk about truth, but country music has often been criticized for its lack of diversity. How do you reconcile that with your idea of authenticity?" Blake's jaw tightened. "You've got it wrong, Joy. Country music isn't about where you come from. It's about the story you tell. If you sing from the heart, that's what matters. It's not about race or background." Joy shot back. "Really, because the numbers don't lie. The industry has been under fire for its lack of diversity for years." Blake scoffed. "You want to talk numbers? Let me tell you what I see on tour. I see people from all walks of life singing the same songs, crying at the same lyrics, laughing at the same jokes. That's real. That's what matters, not some spreadsheet full of statistics." The tension had reached a boiling point. Joy tried to press further, but Blake wasn't having it. "You don't speak for country fans, Joy. And you sure as hell don't speak for America." Joy's eyes flashed. "Excuse me, what do you mean by people like me?" Blake's voice dropped, his words heavy with conviction. "People who think they know better than everyone else. People who look down on small towns, who think we're all just ignorant rednecks." The atmosphere in the studio shifted instantly. What had started as a lighthearted interview was now a full-blown confrontation. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably in her chair, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. But Blake and Joy were locked in, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. "You know," Blake said, his voice rising, "I'm tired of people like you sitting in your ivory towers telling us how to live. You don't speak for country fans. You don't even understand them." Joy bristled, her voice rising in defense. "I've never called anyone ignorant. But I do believe in honest conversations about representation and inclusion." Blake leaned forward. "Honest conversations? What's so honest about this? You invited me here to talk about my music, but all you want to do is lecture me about politics." The audience watched in rapt attention as the conversation spiraled into full-blown chaos. Joy slammed her hand on the table, the sharp crack echoing throughout the studio. "You know what, Blake?" she said, voice icy with authority. "I've been in this business for decades. I don't need some country singer coming in here and telling me how to do my job." Blake sat back, a dangerous grin crossing his face. "Well, I don't need some talk show host who's never even stepped foot in Nashville telling me how to run my industry." The studio fell into a dead silence, the tension thick in the air. Blake's voice was cool, cutting through the awkward silence. "You want to talk about inclusion, Joy? Let's talk about how this show treats country music. When's the last time you had a country artist on here without grilling them about politics? Name 3 from the last 2 years." Joy stammered, searching for an answer. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched painfully. Blake's satisfaction was evident. "That's what I thought," he said, leaning back, his eyes burning with triumph. "You don't care about country music or the people who make it. You just use us when it fits your narrative." Whoopi attempted to regain control. "Blake, let's take a step back. We don't need to make this personal." Blake, however, wasn't backing down. "No, Whoopi. I'm done taking steps back. I'm tired of the media trashing country music and its fans. We're not your enemy, but you sure treat us like we are." Joy's voice grew more intense, her anger rising. "When you make statements like that, Blake, they're exclusionary. People will call you out on it." Blake leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Exclusionary? Maybe you need to step back and understand what country music is really about. It's not about excluding people. It's about telling real stories, the ones that matter." Blake's voice grew louder, a sense of urgency building. "You talk about exclusion, but here's the truth. Country music is probably one of the most inclusive genres out there. We tell stories about everyone. The single mom, the farmer, the soldier, the kid from a small town trying to make it big. It's not about who you are. It's about what you bring to the table." Joy, still bristling, wasn't about to let Blake off the hook. "But what about the systemic issues in the industry? What about the barriers for women and people of color?" Blake's patience finally snapped. "Systemic issues? You want to talk about that? Let's talk about the systemic bias against country music in mainstream media. You're quick to talk about equality, but how about when country artists are excluded from the conversation entirely?" The tension in the studio was palpable as Blake's words hung in the air like an electric current that everyone could feel but nobody dared to touch. The rest of the hosts sat in stunned silence, their eyes bouncing between Blake and Joy. There was no denying the raw emotion that had taken over the conversation. And yet Blake wasn't finished. He sat up straighter, his voice dropping but carrying the same weight as it did earlier. "You sit here in your little bubble surrounded by people who think exactly like you. You preach inclusion, but how often do you actually go outside of this little studio and listen to people who think differently than you?" His words struck like a sharp jab, causing the entire room to freeze as if holding its breath. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Blake didn't give her the chance. "You talk about inclusion, but what do you really know about it? You want to fix the world from behind your desk, but how much do you understand the lives of the people you're talking about?" His voice was calm, yet there was an undeniable fire behind each word. Blake leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing as he looked directly at Joy, who was now visibly rattled. "You criticize the way we live, the way we think, but you don't take the time to understand. How many times have you stepped into a small town? How many times have you sat down with someone who doesn't see the world the way you do? Someone who lives a life so different from your own that you can barely even comprehend it." Blake's words were cutting now, as if each sentence was meant to peel back the layers of assumption and privilege Joy might not even realize she was carrying. "I don't see you running out to places like rural Alabama or Tennessee, talking to the people who vote differently, who think differently. I don't see you getting your hands dirty, getting to know what life is really like for those of us who aren't part of your world." His voice carried weight as he spoke of real life, the life of country music fans, blue-collar workers, and those who felt overlooked and misrepresented by the mainstream media. Joy's face reddened, her posture stiffening. "I do talk to people who disagree with me," she snapped, though the edge in her voice betrayed her growing discomfort. Blake shook his head slowly, disappointment flickering in his eyes. "No, you argue with them. You don't listen. There's a difference, Joy. A big difference." His words were like a quiet storm now, gathering strength and fury. As he continued, "Listening means understanding. It means putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Truly trying to see the world from their perspective, not just your own." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "I don't think you've done that. And until you do, until you actually start understanding the people you love to criticize, you'll never truly get what we're about. You'll keep pushing people away thinking you know better, when all you're doing is creating more division. And that's not what we need. That's not the world we're trying to build." Blake's voice softened, but there was no mistaking the finality in his words. Blake took a deep breath, the weight of everything he had said hanging heavy in the air. The studio was dead silent, every eye on him, every person in the room waiting for what would come next. Even the cameras seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Blake knew that this wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a battle of ideologies, a clash of values and perceptions that had been building for years. He leaned back slightly, his posture more relaxed than it had been just moments before, but the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "You know the saddest part about all of this, Joy?" His voice was quiet now, almost resigned. "We probably agree on more than we disagree on. We both care about people. We both want everyone to have the same opportunities, the same shot at happiness, the same chance to make their lives better. We both believe in the power of art and music to bring people together." He let the words sink in, giving Joy a moment to consider them. The studio was still, the air thick with anticipation. But instead of finding common ground, you've turned this into a battle, a political standoff where you think you're right, and I'm just some guy in your way. You've made this about division, not about connection. And that's where we're at fault. Not just me, not just you. We've both lost sight of what really matters, the people we're supposed to be speaking for. Blake's voice was steady, each word carefully chosen. He paused, his expression softening just a fraction. "But you know what? That's what happens when we approach every conversation like a fight instead of an opportunity to learn something new. You came into this with an agenda. Your own preconceived notions about what country music represents, about who I am and what I stand for, and all I've been trying to do is tell you that you've got it wrong." Blake looked at her, his gaze piercing, but without the venom it had carried moments ago. "I came here hoping for a real conversation. I came here to talk about the music, the stories behind the songs, the fans who pour their hearts into every lyric. I didn't come here to be ambushed by political talking points or to be painted as something I'm not. That's not fair to me, and it's not fair to the people I represent." His voice grew stronger, firmer once again. "And you know the irony of all of this? You have a platform, Joy. You've got the power to change things, to help bring people together. But instead, you've chosen to tear people down. You've chosen to divide us. And that's a real shame because when we divide, we stop listening to each other. We stop understanding, and that's where we go wrong." Blake's gaze softened for a moment as he took in the gravity of what had just transpired. "I'm not perfect, Joy. No one is. But I try every day to respect the people I meet, to understand their struggles and their dreams. And I wish you do the same. Because we all deserve to be heard. Not just the people who think like us, but everyone. That's the conversation we should be having. Not this fight." He paused one last time, his words final. "So, congratulations, Joy. You got what you wanted. You got your confrontation. But in the end, we all lose. Because if we can't have real conversations, if we can't find common ground, then we're just spinning our wheels, going nowhere." As Blake finished speaking, the weight of the moment hung in the air. The audience, still stunned, couldn't help but feel the enormity of what had just happened. This wasn't just television. It was a collision of ideas, of cultures, of two worlds colliding in real time. And in that moment, no one could deny that something much larger than an interview had taken place.